Greetings, mortals. Welcome to our flagship episode of Into the Woods, where we cover 3 tapes of the lost in depth. These are tales that will have you wandering deeper into the forest. Some things should never be unearthed. Some places should never be entered. Some bridges should never be crossed. Tonight, we journey into the woods to explore 3 mysteries. One that begins with a discovery buried beneath an English garden. 2 small stone heads, seemingly ordinary, yet carrying with them an aura of something far darker than mere history. Were they relics of an ancient time, cursed artifacts tied to something long forgotten? Or were they a hoax that spiraled out of control, leaving terror in its wake? Then we travel across the ocean to California, to a place that has long been whispered about in hushed tones. A place where the land itself seems to repel those who walk upon it. Where children have vanished without a trace. Where occultists sought to pry open a door into another world. A place that some claim remains a portal to something else. Our last journey will take us to a bridge hidden deep in the Scottish countryside. It's old, over 100 years old, but not forgotten. To some, it's a picturesque landmark, part of Scotland's rich architectural history. But to others, it's a place of dread, a place where the unthinkable happens, where, for reasons still unknown, dogs leap to their deaths. These are the tapes of the lost.
The year was 1971, and in the quiet town of Hexham, Northumberland, an ordinary backyard became the site of one of the most bizarre and unsettling archaeological discoveries in modern British history. It began with 2 young brothers, Colin and Leslie Robson, who had been playing in the garden of their family home when their small hands struck against something hard beneath the soil. Curious, they dug deeper, revealing 2 small, stone-like heads, carved with grotesque, human-like features. At first glance, the heads seemed old, ancient even. The carvings were crude, yet oddly detailed, with hollowed-out eyes that seemed almost watchful, almost aware. The boys, excited by their discovery, brought the objects inside, proudly showing them to their mother, Mrs. Robson. She initially dismissed them as discarded children's toys or remnants of an old craft project, and placed them on a shelf. That's when the disturbances began. It started subtly. Small items in the house would be found out of place, moved from one side of the room to another with no explanation. Footsteps echoed in empty hallways. The boys reported hearing whispering voices at night, though no one else in the house could hear them. Then things escalated. Doors slammed shut on their own, as if pushed by unseen hands. A strange, sourceless tapping sound would emanate from inside the walls, growing louder at night. And then there was the creature. One evening, as Mrs. Robson walked toward the hallway leading to her bedroom, she stopped abruptly. A shape, tall, dark, and unmistakably animalistic, stood at the far end of the corridor, half concealed in shadow. Its form was massive, covered in thick fur, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural light. She stood frozen, her pulse thundering in her ears, watching as the entity simply stood there, watching her back. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished. Terrified, the Robsons wanted the heads out of their home. They handed them over to a local researcher in the hopes of dispelling whatever energy had been stirred up. But the disturbances followed. The heads changed hands multiple times, moving between paranormal investigators, historians, and private collectors. Each new owner reported strange and terrifying experiences. Objects levitating, poltergeist-like activity, nightmares filled with shadowy figures, and even sightings of the same wolf-like entity that had appeared in the Robson home. One of the most unsettling encounters came from Dr. Anne Ross, a respected Celtic historian who had been called in to examine the heads. Dr. Ross, skeptical of the supernatural, brought the heads into her home. Within days, she began experiencing the same phenomenon reported by the Robsons. One night, she awoke to a presence in her bedroom. A massive, fur-covered figure loomed in her doorway, its features obscured by darkness. It felt real, so real that she could smell the earthy, musky scent of an animal. And then, without a sound, it vanished. Dr. Ross, shaken, began researching the origins of the Hexham Heads. Some experts believed they dated back to Celtic Britain, possibly linked to ritualistic druidic practices. Others speculated they were used in ancient sacrifices, their crude faces representing some forgotten deity or ancestral spirit. But before any definitive answers could be found, the heads vanished. The last confirmed sighting of the Hexham Heads was in the late 1970s, when they were in the possession of a private collector. After that, they simply disappeared. Some believe they were stolen, taken by someone who feared their power. Others claim they were intentionally destroyed, perhaps by someone who believed that breaking them was the only way to end their curse. But there's another theory, one that suggests that the heads were never meant to remain in human hands, that something came for them. In the hills of Pasadena, California, where the San Gabriel Mountains loom against the horizon, there is a place that has long been whispered about, a place that seems to radiate an energy that repels the living. Known as Devil's Gate, it is a jagged, gaping rock formation situated near the Arroyo Seco Canyon. The name itself evokes unease, but the legends surrounding it are far darker than its ominous moniker suggests. For centuries, the indigenous Tongva people spoke of this place as a threshold, a spiritual gateway that led to another realm. They warned that the area was a place of passage, not of settlement, a place where spirits moved freely, where things could enter and exit from realms beyond human understanding. But it wasn't until the 20th century that Devil's Gate became more than just a local legend. It became a site of occult experimentation, disappearances, and unanswered questions. Jack Parsons' rituals. In the 1940s, Jack Parsons, a rocket scientist, occultist, and disciple of Aleister Crowley, became obsessed with Devil's Gate. To the public, Parsons was a brilliant mind, one of the co-founders of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, a man who helped lay the foundation for modern rocket science. But beneath the surface, Parsons was deeply involved in Thelema, an occult movement led by Crowley, who proclaimed himself the Great Beast 666. Parsons believed that Devil's Gate was more than just a rock formation. It was, in his mind, a true interdimensional portal. Convinced that it could serve as a gateway between worlds, he conducted a series of elaborate rituals, known as the Babylon Working, between 1946 and 1947. Alongside his associate L. Ron Hubbard, the future founder of Scientology, Parsons sought to summon the Scarlet Woman, a powerful divine entity that he believed would usher in a new age for mankind. But the rituals took a strange turn. Witnesses reported strange occurrences at the site, shimmering lights, odd temperature fluctuations, and an overwhelming sense of dread. After the final ritual, Parsons believed he had succeeded in opening a portal, but to what? It was only after these events that the true horrors of Devil's Gate began to unfold. The occult connections. In the years following Parsons' experiments, the land around Devil's Gate took on a sinister reputation, not just among the occult community, but within law enforcement as well. Between the 1950s and 1960s, multiple children went missing near Devil's Gate, vanishing without a trace. The first widely publicized disappearances occurred on August 5, 1956, when Donald Lee Baker, 13, and Brenda Howell, 11, two young children from Pasadena, rode their bicycles to the Devil's Gate Dam and were never seen again. Search parties scoured the area for weeks, Their bicycles were found abandoned near the entrance of the canyon, but no clothing, no footprints, no bodies. Nothing was ever recovered. The case left authorities baffled. There were no signs of struggle, no indications of animal attacks. It was as if the children had simply vanished into thin air. Then, a pattern began to emerge. A few years later, in the late 1950s, another child disappeared near the same location. Again, there was no evidence, no struggle, just a child who walked into Devil's Gate and never returned. But the most chilling case came in 1960, when Tommy Bowman, 8 years old, was hiking with his family near the Arroyo Seco. He was just a few steps ahead of them when he turned a corner in the trail. In the span of mere seconds, he was gone. His father sprinted after him, calling his name, but Tommy had simply vanished into the empty air. Despite exhaustive search efforts, no remains were ever found. Local residents began to fear that something or someone was lurking in the area. Was it a serial predator, a secret cult? Or had Parsons's experiments at Devil's Gate succeeded in opening a door to something else? Something that had begun to take its own sacrifices? Mission children. In the years that followed, paranormal investigators, cult researchers, and local historians began to connect the disappearances with Parsons' work at the site. Some believed that the Babylon working rituals had done more than just attempt to summon an entity. They had opened a true gateway, an interdimensional rift where something had crossed over. The theory suggests that the children who disappeared may have been drawn into this unseen dimension, or worse, that something from the other side took them. Other theories point to the possibility that dark forces tied to Crowley's teachings had taken root in the area. Some investigators have suggested that a secret cult may have been operating near Devil's Gate, using the location for rituals that required human sacrifice, with the missing children being unwilling victims. Another more scientific explanation posits that Devil's Gate, with its unusual rock formations and magnetic anomalies, may have been responsible for localized time distortions, causing people to vanish into unseen fractures of reality. The indigenous Tongva people believed this land was sacred. Perhaps they knew of something ancient that lurked beneath its surface. Regardless of the theories, one fact remains. After Parsons' occult rituals, Devil's Gate was never the same again. Paranormal occurrences. Even today, Devil's Gate remains one of the most haunted locations in California. Paranormal investigators who visit the site report strange phenomena, unseen hands pulling on clothing as they walk through the tunnels, disembodied whispers that call out in the night, cold spots and unexplained energy fluctuations detected near the dam's entrance, shadowy figures lurking just beyond the edge of flashlight beams, there and then gone. Some have even claimed to hear the distant laughter of children, echoing through the canyon. But when they call out, no one answers. Visitors who venture too close to the dam report an overwhelming sense of dread, an instinctual urge to leave as if being watched by something unseen. The Overton Bridge was built in 1895, a Victorian-era marvel in the Scottish town of Dumbarton. Designed by landscape architect Henry Milner, it was part of the grand Overton House estate, owned by John White, a wealthy industrialist who made his fortune in chemicals. But beyond its grand design and historical significance, Overton carried with it something else, a feeling. Locals often spoke of a strange presence surrounding the estate, particularly the bridge. And as the years passed, stories began to emerge. Stories that would forever mark Overton as something more than just stone and mortar. The first reports of dogs jumping from Overton Bridge date back to the 1950s. It started as an isolated incident. One dog, then another. But as the pattern grew, so did the fear. Dog owners, shaken and confused, reported the same eerie details. Their dogs would stop at a specific spot, freeze, and then, without warning, leap over the edge. Some survived. Others were not so lucky. With every unexplained event, folklore takes root. Many began to believe Overton Bridge was haunted. According to local legend, Overton House itself has long been a place of ghostly activity. The most persistent story? That of the White Lady of Overton, a spectral woman seen wandering the grounds since the early 20th century. Could this spirit be luring dogs over the edge? Could something unseen be whispering to them, calling them to jump? As chilling as the supernatural theories are, scientists and animal behaviorists have proposed a more rational explanation. The leading theory? The powerful scent of mink. Minks inhabit the area below the bridge, and their strong, musky odor could be triggering a primal hunting instinct in dogs. Add to this the unique shape of the bridge, high parapets that obscure a dog's depth perception, and the mystery begins to unravel. Overton Bridge is now a dark tourism attraction. Some come to pay respects, others to test the legend for themselves. But should it be treated as a curiosity or a cautionary tale? In response to growing concerns, authorities have placed warning signs at the bridge, urging dog owners to leash their pets. While incidents have declined, the mystery lingers, and so do the questions. Overton Bridge stands as a paradox, both beautiful and tragic. A place of history, but also of heartbreak. Perhaps we will never fully understand what draws dogs to this spot. Perhaps it's science. Perhaps it's something beyond our comprehension.
3 mysteries, one tied to an artifact, the other to the land itself, and one to man's best friend. All of them separated by oceans, yet bound by a common thread. The Hexham Heads were discovered, then mysteriously lost. Devil's Gate was sealed, but never truly closed. The pups of Overton Bridge, will their leaps of faith ever be understood? Some doors should never be opened. Some things should remain buried. But once something crosses over, does it ever leave?